Welcome everyone to Connected Learning TV and the kickoff webinar in a month-long series titled The Possibilities of Mobile, Openly Networked and Inquiry-Based Learning. I'm Richard Scullin, founder of mobileed.org, and I'll be the host for today. Throughout October, we are exploring how mobile opens up both formal and informal learning opportunities through games, STEM inquiry, and citizen science and civics initiatives. Today, we're going to be chatting specifically about how mobile devices can turn places into learning spaces. Before we dive into our chat, let's go over a few quick details. To those participating in the live stream right now, we encourage you to use the chat there to introduce yourselves, connect with each other, and ask questions that we can address at the Google Plus Hangout. And speaking of Google Plus, there's a fast-growing connected learning community with over 2,600 members. We'd love for you to be part of that badges conversation that's happening there, and the link to the Google Plus community should be included in the live stream chat. Hi, Chris. The link for our public and group notes.
Hey guys, I'm hoping this works a little better.
Yeah, good, cool. Sorry, the link for our public group notes, Google Doc, for today should be in the live stream chat by now. We'd really appreciate your energy in capturing some of the highlights and sharing the resources related to today's conversation. That Google Doc will remain open to the public so we can continue adding to it even after today. I'm getting just a little bit of delay and feedback, so I just want to address that issue before we go any further. I'm going to pause for just a second. Can you still hear me?
We hear you, yes.
Okay.
I do.
Are you hearing feedback?
That makes sense.
Okay. So first I wanted to start off with some introductions. We can start with Chris, if that's possible, on the left-hand side, and we'll move over to the right with the various people who are participating in this hangout on mobile learning.
So hey, I am Chris Emdin, professor of science education at Teachers College, Columbia University in the Department of Math, Science, and Technology. And I'm also a co-creator of the Hip Hop Ed hashtag and the Science Genius Project.
Okay, I think I'm next. Hey everybody, my name is Jack Martin, and I am the Associate Director for Online Leadership at Global Kids, which means I get to use all kinds of technology and digital media, including mobile technology, to educate high school and middle school youth about global and world issues and human rights. And I'm psyched to be here.
Hey there, I'm Matthew Battles. I'm Associate Director of metaLAB at Harvard, which is a project, I should say, of the Berkman Center. We investigate scenarios for technology in the arts and humanities and the sciences as well. Most of our work is with a graduate and undergraduate education, but we've certainly had projects that have involved informal learning and high schoolers as well. So I'm excited to learn from this group and share some of our experience as well.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Sorry about this. Hi, my name is Steve Vosloo. I'm a mobile learning specialist with UNESCO based in Paris, where we are running a number of mobile learning projects around the world, specifically with teachers and teacher development, and also looking at mobiles for literacy, gender and mobiles, and mobile learning and policy. I'm South African, and most of what I learned about mobile I've learned there, and I founded a project called Yoza Cell Phone Stories, which published short stories on mobile phones for young people to read. So I'd gladly share some insights from that here. So thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to deal with this delay issue, and I'll try to speak through it. I welcome any suggestions. So I just wanted to use as our starting point an article that Audrey Waters wrote for The Atlantic just, I think it was yesterday or the day before. It's called Students Are Hacking Their School-Issued iPads. Good for them. And what I really like about this text is that Audrey is talking about a school district in LA where the kids are actually kind of doing workarounds on the iPads and using them for different uses. So what's also interesting about Audrey's approach here is that she's talking about mobile use and iPad and tablet use in a different way other than just kind of replicating tests or using it for test administration or using it for textbooks. And she, invokes Seymour Papert and also Paulo Freire and folks like that who are thinking about creation and making and technology instead of just consumption, instead of that kind of container that is filled with data or learning. So I'm fascinated with that approach, and I wanted to kind of use that as a jumping off point. I also wanted to, so I guess the connection I'm trying to make here is that of all your projects, I know that Chris's work with hip hop, and also Steve's work with Yowza, and Matthew's work with the Arbonauts, and Jack's work with NYC Haunts, all involve mobile and technology, but they also involved kids creating stuff and people creating things and engaging with their environment. And so that's why I think this is a fascinating and unique group. And I'd like to kind of use your experiences with learners, with students, with people to kind of use that to fuel our conversation and kind of bring out some of this idea, the ideas that Audrey's talking about and Papert's talking about. So I have some questions, but I think we can also talk about some of our experiences. The first one is really like how do we turn place into a learning space? Is that do we need the device to do that? And if we do use the device, how does that affect the learning experience, the context? Is it additive, or do we even need the device to mediate the experience in context?
I can jump in there if no one else is to jump in there. I actually have experience in thinking about place in education, both using a device and not using a device. So let me just start off. I can talk about the device. I'll tell you the device story first, and it also ties back to the earlier question, Richard's earlier question about in projects. So one of the really cool, amazing projects that that Global Kids is part of right now and has been part of for several years is a project called New York City Haunts, or NYC Haunts. And it's basically an alternate mobile reality game that teaches youth about neighborhood history. And it teaches them, and it does it in a couple ways. It engages youth as game designers, as mobile game designers, and they have to they not only have to research the history of their neighborhood to create the game, but they also have to think. They also in a way serve as curators. So they have to choose which pieces of the history are the most interesting or tell the best parts of the story, and then they curate almost like a scavenger hunt trek through the neighborhood. The actual thrust of the program is for NYC Haunts is there are dead people all over New York City, and they are haunting our neighborhoods. Now, don't run away screaming, and it's up to the youth of the neighborhood to find out who those ghosts are, what may have led to their timely or untimely demise, and what were the social or economic factors or environmental factors that may have contributed to that, and then how can they help that ghost stop haunting the neighborhood and move on. And so we have, and again, this is all done through mobile device and research. And one of the first trek we did, which was really kind of mind-blowing and cool. We basically it took place in the Bronx, near Fordham Road, in the library on Fordham Road, And basically, the kids, they were intrigued by the Edgar Allan Poe house, which is actually up there. They didn't know that Edgar Allan Poe lived up there. And so basically from their curiosity about what that house was, and actually there's a video on the New York Public Library website that will actually, that shows you the kids' experience of learning that they had no idea that Edgar Allan Poe lived there, as the players didn't, but the game designers had to research that. But basically, inspired by one of Edgar Allan Poe's poems, they built this trek that leads them all around the Bronx and then eventually lands them at Edgar Allan Poe's house. And the kind of learning that actually happens, that they experience as they're playing, is, so there's like a store there that's like a dollar store, and the kids, you know, learn that that dollar store used to actually be a Jewish synagogue. So one of the kids said in the video, he said, you know, I had no idea this used to be a place where people, you know, worship God, and now they worship shopping here. So it's kind of amazing to have like that kind of like, to have like those kind of like brain pops when they're playing the game. And then eventually, and I'll be quiet in a minute, sorry, I'm kind of rambling on forever, but eventually they learned in the trek that that Edgar Allan Poe moved to the Bronx because his wife had a lung condition, and he thought that, and it was rumored that the air was better up in the Bronx as opposed to being in the city, in Manhattan. Unfortunately, it didn't work so well because she died anyway, and that's actually the ghost that was haunting the neighborhood. But the kids told that story, and so again, like, they had the experience as game designers and researching, but the players continue to play the story, and they continue to learn about the history of that specific neighborhood. So I guess in a nutshell, kids are really one point of connection for kids is actually through their neighborhood. They're very interested in where they are and where they live, and they love to learn more about it. So that's kind of how Haunts, I think, sort of capitalizes on that. We've been doing more treks ever since. Right now we're working on an amazing trek with Brooklyn Public Library. But in a nutshell, that's that project. And I don't even know, did I even answer your question, Matthew? Richard, is there more? I feel like I should pass it along to somebody else.
Well, you know, I think the key thing that I wanted to discuss here is that that difference between place and space. So how do we create these spaces for learning out of physical spaces? And I've always made the argument that, you know, a space can be created if youth have the tools to transform a physical space into somewhat of an alternate reality that is rooted in the physical place they're in, but allows them to envision that place differently. And what mobile devices have done with my work is it's giving the device itself becomes a portal to be able to transform the place into a space. And once they are embedded in those new spaces, you know, the device becomes the passport, the portal. Then they're into this new space. In this new space, they are grounded in the reality of the place they've been in. But they realize that this tool allows them to see that place in a different way. And so if you have 30 students in the classroom who are embedded in the same place that's been constricted, once they are enveloped into an alternate space without structure, then their ability to enact their agency becomes different. So what the mobile devices does is just allows them to envision their present in a very different way. And their constraints that come with physical space get eliminated. You know, once the constraints of physical space get eliminated, then they're allowed to see new possibilities. But I think that it's necessary to have a place before you can invade a space, because every individual within that space has to have a shared experience. Once they have that shared experience with a constricting physical space, then they have the opportunity to be able to envision new possibilities of how that initial place can be. And so what you described with the young people hacking is exactly that. The hack is an effort to recreate a confining physical space. And so once you're giving a mobile device and you're saying to the kid, use that within this place, it doesn't become a portal.
Yeah.
Once you're saying hack this device, then it becomes a key to unlock new possibilities. And so the hacking process is them saying, don't give me a tool that still confines me. Allow me to utilize that tool to see new possibilities.
I love it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think particularly the point about you know, the reflection on and transformation of space into place is one of the great kind of modalities or themes that that these devices can help us do. And I think, you know, what Jack and Chris have both talked about are programs that are designed wonderfully and very carefully to reveal, the kind of joints in the world and in the devices where hacking can take place. Because I do think one of the dangers is that these devices don't come as tabula rasa themselves, right? I mean, they come with their own constraints. They come with their own they're bundled into networks, consumer networks, commercial networks, technological networks, and it's important to find ways to hack that capacity of or those qualities of the devices as well. And I think like that wonderful moment Jack describes when students see the kind of scrim or screen over the world of the present kind of peeled away and revealed that the store, there was a synagogue here. There are textures in history and place that we need to do some work to tease out and identify in well-designed programs like these. The devices can really help to crack that open. I do worry a little bit about Audrey's piece is an exciting one. But there are layers of hacking, aren't there? And the iPad hacks that she was talking about are largely hacks that are hacks to systems that were put in place by politically driven educational policy, right? I mean, getting beyond the fetters put on the browser to protect children from the big bad internet, right? But there are other layers of fetters in that device as well, and those are worth reflecting on when we design these programs, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm especially interested in. And she mentioned that beyond just being a textbook, beyond just being a device used to test. So I mean, Steve in South Africa actually, I think he had over 47,000 comments on the literature that he was. And Steve, was that SMS that you were producing that literature on, or?
No, Yoza's cell phone stories is actually it's actually browser based.
Okay.
Because in South Africa there are a lot of there certainly aren't many smartphones, but there are a lot of feature phones, so which can access the internet, and the data is relatively cheap. So enough kids had phones with a basic browser that we could actually publish these short stories on. I mean, I say the stories are short, but they were 20 or 30-page Word documents. So, to read that story on a 1 square inch screen sounds like absolute hell to us. But we broke it down into small enough chunks, short chapters, 400 words, and kids could comment on every chapter. They could vote on stuff. All the comments were public after moderation. But it was I like that piece as well in the Atlantic, and it reminded me that mobiles are such personal devices, whether they're your tablet or your phone. And now you have a device that is deeply personal for a young person, and you're saying outside of school they're using it to socialize, to explore, to find out stuff, to play games. Whereas in the class you can only use it for school, which can be kind of boring and can be constrained. And so there's definitely going to be a tension there. I wanted to just share a story about space and location. I did a project in 2007 where I was based at Stanford. I was a research fellow there, and we were looking at how mobiles and technology can be used for building cross-cultural awareness. And so these kids, I had a group in the Bay Area and I had a group in Cape Town, and I asked them to create their own blogs and to basically use their phones to capture things about their lives. So their hobbies, the one did graffiti, so he kind of showed us some interesting graffiti places around the city. The one girl kind of showed us around her room, so it was kind of what are you reading, what are your hobbies, what kind of music you're listening to. And because the device is personal, it really gave a very personal and intimate view into someone's life. And preparing for this webinar, I was reflecting that it's not that the device was location aware, because back then it wasn't as common as it is now, but the device made the user location aware. And by having such a personal device and by being given the chance to express yourself and your space in a way that became public, it really kind of made the kids very conscious of the things that are around them and why those things are there, and to really, to be much more conscious of place.
That's a wonderful point, a wonderful anecdote, and I think it strikes me as illustrative of the way in which it seems like it's important that that these devices find ways to be integrated into learning, such that the app, if you will, is the world, right? I mean, the app is out, and the app is the connections we make. It's the relationships that obtain kind of within the kind of structure of not only the classroom or the learning environment, but all of those rich personal relationships that learners have with each other, that they have with people outside of that immediate network. And then the devices become ways to, as Chris said, hack those, reflect on them, draw on their power, rather than kind of appifying the education. Use some of the affordances of the device and that personal relationship that Steve describes to hack the world beyond the devices.
You know what I love about what Steve described? It is just that, is the personal nature of the device. So, as educators, what we want to be able to do, and I always make the argument for, this focus on a reality-based education, which means an education that focuses on the reality of youth experiences and utilizes those youth experiences as the anchor for the instruction. And the only way that you can get insight into those realities is to be able to, to have a piece of those experiences that students have outside of the classroom in school. Now, you may ask the question, what is it that they can bring from outside into school? And it could be the jacket, it could be the shirt, it can be the tie, it can be the book bag. But the personal nature of the mobile device, it becomes that inanimate object that walks with me every day. But it's also the one object that can speak back. It becomes this tool that I can allow to speak for me when everything else in my world can't speak. And so, a project that we work with the kids in the Bronx and Brooklyn, it's essentially where the teacher delivers instruction based on a topic, and the students go home to capture images and short videos of their experiences in life that call forth what they learned in school. And then those images and those videos become the anchor for the instruction. It's almost like a digital show and tell. And so when the students come back to the classroom and play back those videos or display those images, they have to then describe how those images or those videos call forth what they've learned in school, but also speak to their experiences every day. And the power in that experience of having something capture your real life but still make sense of what you learned in school, and then your physical self describing for the rest of the world how your reality has been captured by that video or by that short image. I mean, there's nothing else that we have as educators in our arsenal that can do that. And it's the bringing to life of that inanimate object so that it can tell a tale about your realities when there are no other tools to do that. And so, Steve, I think what you touched upon there about the personal nature of the device and what that means or what that could mean for education is absolutely powerful.
Can I just jump in and just say, so could we take those ideas that you just discussed about making personal and this computer that's traveling with the kids and how personal it is and how much enthusiasm there's around it? It's pretty clear, How could that inform science education and learning in the world as far as scientific inquiry? Chris, I know that you've been doing STEM work. I know, I don't know if Steve's done any work in that realm, but I know also the Arbonauts was, from out of the metaLAB at Harvard, we're looking at kind of data maps, location as an on-ramp to data sources, but also narratives and video and also points of creation, meaning students creating something in situ, like in the context. And so I'm kind of fascinated that the mobile device could be this ability for us to leap out of the classroom. And as I blogged once, turn the city into a science lab, you know, or whatever.
I hate to just really quickly pop back in before the idea leaves me. You know, one of the projects that we've worked on, just extending beyond the narrative I just described, was just that, where the kids go out to find the science in the city or the science in their real life and bring them back to the classroom. You know, one of the things that I found in my research over the last decade in science teaching and learning is that students perceive what's going on in the science classroom as completely divorced from their real life experiences. And so if the mobile device becomes a tool through which they can almost be, you know, pushed forward into looking at those connections between the science and the real life experiences, it works. So, you know, we have kids in the Bronx who are looking at weathering, who had a lesson on weathering, and all of a sudden are walking through their neighborhood to look for examples about weathering. It's almost like an ongoing walking and moving Google images, where the teacher would traditionally take the images that they would use from what they found online or what they found in a textbook, but then have the students go out there and search for these images and short videos in their communities that become what they use as the anchor for instruction. So in essence, the teacher develops this digital image toolkit that is based on images and videos that are collected by young people, right, and are tagged by young people, based on how aligned they are or how close they are or how much they reflect science content that's learned in the classroom. Now this digital archive then becomes something that the teacher has for 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, next semester, next class period. But it's very, very different from the traditional classroom image that are used, you know, from Google Images or a textbook, but it's a living, breathing, ever-evolving, ever-growing digital archive of images based on science content.
I think that, you know, the power of these devices to help students produce those kinds of databases, both for teachers to reflect on practice over time, and for the students then to do work with those data that they've collected in the field. I think it's a terrific prospect. You know, I can talk a little but about Arbonauts, which Richard mentioned a couple of times. I should say at the outset that a mobile device wasn't like a kind of primary modality of that project, but of course it was a project that emerged in the context of ubiquitous mobile devices and acknowledged those devices and made use of the devices that the students brought with them. It was a project we undertook at Nuvu Studio, which is an exciting, relatively new education venture in Central Square here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, started by Saida Rita, who's out of MIT. And Nuvu Studio describes itself as an innovation hub for young people, and it presents students join for a semester or a year, and they go through a series of 2-week-long design studios, each of which is devoted to a theme, and they make technology. They do design work exploring that theme. So the Arbonauts studio was focused on Arnold Arboretum, a Harvard-managed park site in Boston, about a 300-acre park that's also an arboretum. I mean, it's a museum of trees, basically, or a zoo for trees, if you will. And, you know, there are tens of thousands of specimens of trees there. The Arboretum has collected data on all of those trees, when they were planted, how much they've grown over the years. They collect a lot of environmental data. All of that is very hard to see when you go to the place to, like, walk your dog or play Frisbee. And so we had the students, you know, not only exploring that space, that parkland space, with extant technology, but really making technology. We used Arduino to set up sensor packs in the space, to have the students, you know, kind of deconstruct the kind of means of data production. You know, the data no longer were streams of kind of magical material that came to them over an ephemeral network, but they were things that they were making and capturing, and they saw the production of those data in situ. You know, when they put a temperature probe in a stream, or put a wind meter on the side of a tree, and then you know, they gathered those data and began to play with visualizations, with mentorship from some web programmers on our team, and began to enliven the map of that space with those data, with charismatic visualizations of those data, that helped to knit together space and place for them. It helped to make the Arboretum into a place where not only you could walk and have a kind of beautiful view of trees in the middle of the city, but all of this all these incredible natural phenomena were happening at the same time. Phenomena that they could participate in and come to understand. They could ask questions of and devise a way to test the validity of their answers. So a lot of that had to do with making the technology in the first instance, I thought, and then very much documenting that process through the mobile devices that they had on hand, using those mobile devices to answer questions in the field as they arose, and acknowledging the real power of those devices all at every step.
I love the demystifying through creation of the data streams. That's great.
You know, and that's the space. You know, that's the third space. Is all that alternate conversation, all that alternate dialogue, all that tagging. So in real life, you're walking through, you're throwing frisbee and you're playing with your dog, but in that virtual space, in that third space, it's data flying back and forth, and it's all hanging fruit that you can pick up and use at your leisure. It's this level of intersubjectivity that the traditional classroom just can't provide. I mean, and you know, when we think about this work, you know, what fascinates me the most about it is these multiple layers that young people construct and create. It's almost otherworldly. And once you give them the ability to be able to enter those spaces, they can always pull the information from there back to the actual spaces. But damn it, after a while, real life is becomes so boring and so constraining that the entire school structure has to exist in this way to be able to capture their imaginations. And this is where we have to go. If we don't, I don't know. I'm speaking to the choir here, but I mean, if we don't go here, if we don't go here, if anybody else is watching, if we don't go here, if we don't interrogate this type of work and these kind of worlds that young people create, where information is just like low-hanging fruit, you know, and it's so succulent and it's so enticing, then we are just replicating existing school structures, and we know those school structures haven't worked and won't work and probably will never work. You know, this is where we need to go. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just get I get excited about the possibilities.
It's really evocative, that message, and I think it's terribly important as well. And you know, I think it also this kind of exploration, the power in it, to my mind, is giving kids the keys and making them feel empowered to make these systems work for them. To acknowledge that you know, data, that information, that media come from other places in the world, places that are situated in the world, that they aren't at our beck and call quite so simply as oftentimes our devices want us to think. And you know, by making it possible for them to construct some of those connections for themselves, or take them apart and see how they're put together, you know, you begin to not only take apart that old world where the schools haven't worked, but also think about the ways in which schooling might work in this networked world. I mean, the kids, you know, John Palfrey has said, and I think it's a really important point, that you know, we tend to divide the world into the online and the offline, but young people don't see that. They just see the world. There's no simple distinction there. And at the same time, just as the world of the online-offline dichotomy, it's a world that's structured. It's a world that has relations of power, and that becoming fully vested participants in civic dialogue means taking up the kind of means of technological inquiry and deconstruction, as well as making and construction.
So this brings you lead right into the next question. It's like the kids, those layers aren't necessarily as evident to them. They just do them. When I busted something out with like, look, you can use the mobile to do this, they were like, of course, right? And meanwhile, the teachers were saying, oh, wow, like you used a mobile device to do that. So, I mean, there's that difference, which leads to a question that my daughter posed. She said, so all these guys are doing these cool projects, how did the students respond? What was the student response to this, you know, using reading literature on a cell phone, or what was the kids' response to NYC haunts, or you know, or anything that Chris is doing with hip hop? I know that you're featured in NPR and stuff like that. It seemed like, you know, things was good, but like behind the scenes, behind like a whole bunch of uh, academics or teachers or theoreticians or whatever people just kind of pontificating, like what was the reality of the kids' responses behind the scenes?
Well, I can start off. I mean, NYC Haunts is, you know, it's a very complex game to build, and it does take a lot of dedication and a lot of determination. But I think like what I mean, and I've been like loving what everybody has been saying, and I was, you know, and what a lot of what Chris was saying, and I think one thing that they love is that, you know, with this kind of learning, they're not just like hacking like the styles and like the school and the classroom kind of like experience. They're actually like hacking the content that they're taught in schools. So in a way, they're actually taking the lead in deciding like what gets taught and what, you know, in haunts they choose the stories of history, and sometimes that history may never this story may have never been told before. Like, you don't learn it in history books. You learn it because it's in your neighborhood and it's where you are, and you know, in a way it's kind of a piece of you, and that's why it's important. But that's I think about, and I think they like that. They like to discover new things that they might not have learned in school, and then turn those into education tools. I have to say that kids really do love haunts. They love like the ghost concept. They love the idea that people are like dead people maybe walking around the city. But you know, as we've been talking about, they also love they love the device. They love using the apps to actually build and code the game. You know, we've been piloting new software this fall with Brooklyn Public Library called Tailblazer, and it's so much fun. It's like building Legos. But they're learning about history. They're learning to tell a story, and then they're learning to code a game. All that at the same time. So and the players actually like it too. We actually have high school teachers write into their curriculum for students to come and actually play through some of our NYC Haunts treks in the city. So it's loved by all.
You know, one thing that I think is important to note is it's also about how these tools are introduced, and whether or not the way that we introduce these tools replicate the ways that we introduce traditional tools in classrooms. So, you know, I've always been a fan of the process-oriented guided inquiry approach to instruction. So if you go into a classroom with a bunch of young people and say, hey, you know, we're going to use our mobile device to create some hip-hop beats, which we've done, and then you guys are going to rhyme over your beats and actually record your tracks on your cell phone. You know, that sounds exciting, but that's corny, because Dr. Emdin came in and told him to do it. And if I said, hey guys, I'm going to give you guys a list of 5 apps. This one makes beats. This one helps you to record. This one helps you to write down your lyrics. This one, you know, and I say, you know, at the end of this, I don't know what you guys are going to produce, but I'll give you all these tools. Engage in this process of deconstructing these tools and these apps and finding out what they do. Then all of a sudden it becomes an exploration. And learning is inherently based on exploration. So it's really a matter of presentation. We don't have to present to the kids these neat packages that we want them to use these tools to create. We want to provide them with the tools and allow them to play. Oftentimes they will match what we've invented, and in other instances they'll go beyond that. So it's really a matter of inquiry approaches to instruction being what is used in traditional classrooms, as well as classrooms that are sort of using mobile education. So, you know, so that's one thing. And then the other thing is also, listen, you know, if you give kids a tool and it's something that they have no hand in creating, even if it sounds like the coolest tool in the world, they're not necessarily as engaged as they would be otherwise. And this is why Jack's work is so important. is because the kids are going up there and they're coding and then they're creating and they're manipulating. Then they have the outcomes, and then their tools are being given to other people to play with. And you know, that's why when he talked, he said, no, the kids all love it. Of course the kids all freaking love it. The kids all love it because you're letting them create the stuff, then you're letting them do it, and then you're letting them share it. and if we don't do that, then, you know, we limit the potential for them to be excited about the tools.
Yeah. So I want to give that's awesome. I love this. Steve, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Just to say that with Yoza cell phone stories, as I said, the users could leave comments, and you know, a lot of the work that I had studied in terms of participatory culture and the writings and the thinking, you know, Henry Jenkins from MIT Media Lab back then, and a lot of the examples came out of the global north. You need basically good broadband connectivity. So you can create amazing YouTube videos, or you can create your own Wikipedia pages. Whereas in South Africa, most people don't have that. They just have a phone with a tiny screen, but it can get online. Mm-hmm. But by giving them the opportunity to leave a comment, even if it's just 5 words, that's participatory culture. That's giving somebody a voice. And it's incredibly rewarding and terrifying sometimes, you know, being the person behind that platform, because they're brutal. I mean, they're brutally honest in their praise if they think it's a great story, and if it's changed their life in some way, and they're brutally honest if they think it's terrible and it sucks, you know, and it's the worst story in the world. But it's amazing to get that immediate feedback. I think it's very empowering for giving young people that kind of voice and that kind of agency. And it teaches them so well. It creates a live environment to learn how to communicate online, how to express yourself, to think maybe about what you're writing, to be open to have other people comment on your, you know, on your comments or your form of expression. So it's very empowering. But overall, with Yoza, anyways, the kids seem to love it, and it was great to to get it from, you know, kind of directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
That's great. So I have a question from the live stream. It says, to what extent is age segregation likely to prevent effectiveness of mobile technology, or will mobile technology break down that tendency to segregate by age? I'm not sure exactly what that's referring to. I mean, is it because some kids don't have a mobile device? We know from Pew that there are 4 billion mobile phones worldwide, and there's like 91% of American adults have a cell phone, and something like 63% of the adult cell phone owners are using that cell phone to go online. But maybe they're referring to younger kids, but who knows? So do you have any thoughts, any of you, on age segregation and mobiles?
I think it's about curiosity.
Yeah.
I think it's about being curious and about, I know, and again, maybe I'm not reading the question right, but I think that, like, again, it's about curiosity, and anybody at any age can be excited about mobile. I mean, kids are excited about mobile because their lives are on their phones literally every day, and I would actually venture to say that, you know, a lot of the people who are cell phone owners are probably kids, because that's their lives, that's who they are. So I think it's about curiosity. I don't know if it's so much about age, but I don't know, Chris, what do you think?
I was just thinking that, you know, in a virtual space or in a third space, there is no age. There's only intellectual curiosity and the ability to engage with somebody who has, you know, sort of a certain like-mindedness. That's the fascinating thing about how social networks are created, is just that you are connected with folks in real life. We connect with folks based on where we've been segregated to be in. So all third graders hang out with third graders, all 12th graders hang out with 12th graders, all black kids sit together in the cafeteria, or Beverly Tatum's work. And so when there are no identities associated with phenotype and socioeconomic segregation, when we enter into this space where the physical things that confine us and lock us into these spaces are removed, then we are able to engage and create this intersubjectivity based on our intellectual curiosity, our like-mindedness, our shared ideals, our shared goals, our shared beliefs, our shared interests and topics. And so, in essence, in these virtual spaces, if you invite people from different communities that have been previously segregated by the physical structures in real life, once they're in there and they're engaging together, unless they self-identify and choose to put themselves or put that self forward, all that we get from you is who you are, why you want to be here, why you want to learn together, why you want to engage with me. And so these spaces do, they do break down age divides. They, in many instances, may break down racial and ethnic divides, and at least they have the potential to do so. And then the choice to.
I think that the potential is it's extremely powerful, and at the same time, you know, I do worry that that we presume that the devices are going to do this for us, rather than the kind of careful instructional design and reflection and research that all of you have put into your programs to make sure that those third spaces emerge as free spaces, as spaces where experimentation with self and identity can take place, where it doesn't get in the way. But I don't think the device does that by itself. And I think one of the dangers of mobile technology is that and the ways in which we're consuming technology as consumers today is that it tends to promote an ideology that that the technology kind of warps us, you know, just teleports us past all of those old strictures of the past. But it brings many of those with it. I mean, after all, we are talking about, Richard's statistics about the penetration of mobile technology into society are compelling, but it's important to remember that those are mostly consumer technologies, right? So parents are, families are, in North America, bearing the burden of costs that, you know, may have been taken care of by public schooling systems before, you know. So I mean, these are real impacts on people, and I think we need to bear those kinds of impacts in mind. Economic factor, and the ways in which students and the young people are much better at this than we are, know the cohorts they're talking to, they're texting with. They pick up on cues very subtly, and so I think it's absolutely vital that those third spaces that Chris describes be created, and I think these devices are very powerful ways to create those. But a fair amount of attention needs to be paid to the design of those so that they are emancipatory rather than reproductive of many of the systems that make schools prior to mobile technology stultifying and stratifying places.
Well, I think like one of the things, and this is something that Chris talked about, but also that you talked about, and I'm also really excited about Steve's project too. But is the power of the teacher to actually lead the student? I mean, because I think like kids are using these spaces for a lot of different reasons, whether they're just like, you know, geeking out in fandoms, or whether they're actually, you know, doing something like NYC Haunts or something, or the storytelling that Steve talked about. But I think that they almost need a mentor or a teacher to actually say like, hey, you could actually do this with that technology too. Because I think they know what they can already do with it, but maybe what we have to do is like open some doors for them to be able to see like other possibilities and other learning possibilities. And I think like once we do that, and this goes back to what Chris was saying, like the landscape is like tremendous. Just based on what about Steve was talking about with like mobile storytelling, I am amazed every day at who hacks the news on Twitter. I mean, it's just amazing. And all these voices. I mean, when Hurricane Sandy happened last year, like, and when you just got locked into like what was happening around New York City in the news, and you saw 3 places, and everybody all over the city was running around tweeting pictures of where they were standing and what was happening in Staten Island when it wasn't in the news. And that to me, like, there's just so much potential there. Again, to throw open the doors of who's telling the stories and what stories are getting told. And that's what I get really, really excited about. That's what I was like cheering a minute ago when Chris was talking. But again, like I think we need teachers to help guide that. And if they don't guide it, it's gonna. I mean, we have to guide it, because if we don't, then it's gonna, they're gonna go in other places. So we need to help them stay focused.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really good point, and it especially gets back to digital literacies and information literacies and 21st century skills, where a lot of these spaces are very they're open, and they're kind of a bit like the Wild West, some of them. You know, and I totally agree with what Chris is saying, that these third spaces have the potential to strip away physical traits that usually may not bring people together or may separate them. But I think in a lot of these spaces, those same traits of things that identify you or make you different to someone else get brought in as well. And you know, I'm thinking in particular of this mobile instant messaging platform in South Africa called Mixit, hugely popular, and that's where we publish a lot of our Yoza stories. But you know, you have your friends and you chat. And there was a really interesting study done in 2008. I'll put the link in the chat, and then a paper written as well about mobile literacies, where one of the first things that people would ask you on Mixit, they would type in the letters. They would say, "What's your ASLR?" which stands for age, sex, location, and race. Okay, so these are unmediated chat rooms. Okay, so immediately it's like, okay, who are you? And you know, all of those things have just been stripped away. You got to bring back, so we can actually put you in a bit of a box. And obviously, kids play around with that, you know, and you can be anybody in a chat room. But it's very interesting that I think it also has the potential to still entrench those divides. And that's where that's where I wanted to say, kind of just say that the role of the teacher as somebody who can help you navigate that space, and at least have the discussions around identity and around these different issues. The facilitator of those discussions, a teacher would be great for that.
Yeah, it's a great point. That these spaces we do design them, the third spaces, and the modalities that are accessible through the mobile devices can be used to surface the kind of qualities that we use as ways to structure the world and structure our prejudices, but they can also be used as ways as platforms for critiquing, for exploring those, by virtue of the very fact that you can take on other personae. You can mix and match these qualities, and so you can design interventions that allow the kind of provocation and reflection on those things that otherwise divide us. But I think it is so important, and the kind of examples that Steve is pointing to point up how these qualities they follow us into the spaces made by mobile technology, and in a way we can kind of catch them there and begin to take them apart.
I like it. So we're close to the end, not totally at the end, but first of all, I think this is a fabulous conversation. I think we could have several more. But I wanted, it's kind of predictable that I would ask something about, forward-looking, future-looking, kind of visionary, like where do you see mobile even next year? Just because technology moves so quickly. But I guess, where do you see mobile next year as far as learning and location, and will we have transformed some of those places into learning spaces, and one of the things I'm always thinking about, because I work at Mount Greylock High School and I'm working in a digital media and learning lab, is that how do you integrate something as seemingly radical as kind of inquiry-based learning into the confines and strictures of a Common Core standard or the curricula that teachers honestly need to, at least now in public schools, have to follow. So how do those two meet? That's one of the things I'm thinking about. Where do you see it? I mean, you could take these responses anywhere you want, but we have just a couple more minutes, I think. So.
Yeah, I'll jump in because I have to run at the very top of the hour, and say that I think that a lot of the kind of social, methodological, interpersonal gestures that all of these researchers and practitioners have talked about, that's where the potential in the future lies. You know, as you say, Richard, it's impossible to predict where the technology is going to take us and what those the effects of those technologies are going to be with the advent of Google Glass and who knows what coming up after that. But if we have reflective practice in place, we can respond to that. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go. It was great to meet all of you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Jack?
Sorry, I was unmuting myself. I think I think that people, you know, for me, the future of mobile technology in education is really maybe there's more people using it in education, because I'm not even sure. I don't, you know, from this conversation, I've gotten a pretty good sense of the lay of the land, but I'm not sure how many people are doing it. And the thing that I get excited, especially about, like I said, with what Steve was talking about, and with mobile storytelling, is that there's just so many stories that can be told and spun in so many ways. So, for example, one of the things that Global Kids is talking about now, and I was actually going to talk about this a little bit earlier, but in conversation went somewhere else because it was exciting, is we talk a lot about climate change and the environment. And so, you know, what if we built some kind of mobile experience that taught kids about, you know, that illustrated to kids, you know, what are examples of climate change or you know, change the environment in New York City or around any city. So we're thinking about, you know, taking sort of, you know, what we've learned about designing, you know, educational curricula around mobile learning, and seeing how we can bend that and flex that, and then take it to another, you know, take it to address a different subject or a different topic. We're also looking at maybe looking at other, you know, at looking at like institutions. So, you know, what can we do, you know, mobily within, you know, a museum to tell stories and things like that. So that's kind of what Global Kids is thinking anyway at this point.
Great. And I know that Steve's involved with UNESCO, so you probably have some good insights.
All right.
You know, it's a really good question, Richard. Where's it all going? I usually try and avoid those because who knows, you know.
Right.
But I think that I think ultimately, maybe not next year, but let's look way into the future. You'll just have learning, okay? Learning won't be something that necessarily happens only at school and then at home you relax and play. So learning can happen anywhere and at any time. And by doing more kind of location aware and location based and moving more along this path that talks about mobility, mobile learning, mobile devices, mobile people, that learning experience then just becomes, it's just learning, and it could be anywhere and it could be anytime. So
I like it. That's great. So thanks everyone for this great conversation. By tomorrow, we should have a full recording of this webinar and other curated content up at www.connectedlearning.tv, and you can share that with your networks. This wraps up our first webinar of this month-long series, and we encourage everyone to keep this energy going by using the Twitter hashtag MobileEd, and also hashtag Connected Learning, and by getting involved with the Connected Learning Google Plus community. Next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, we'll meet again on a live stream to share some insights on the changing relationships between youth and technology and adults and teachers. So again, thank you very much. Sorry we lost some of our members, but I totally appreciate your spending time with us this afternoon, or this evening for you, Steve. And
thanks, Richard. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Bye.
Bye then.
Bye.